Hello and welcome back. In this video we're going to talk about an important subject a lot of people find boring but which is absolutely critical, and that is backing up your image files. It's one thing to have all your photographs on your computer, but it's absolutely critical to have some method of backing them up, and the most important thing is making sure that you're backing them up the right way, because if you lose your valuable images you can never replace them. If you lose your camera gear, you can always go out and buy a replacement, but there's no way to replace those vital images that you've collected over many years of photography. And thinking about this, I once heard an IT specialist speaking on the radio, and he said there are two types of people: those that have had a hard drive failure and those that are going to have one. And the important message here is that all hard drives will fail eventually. So how do we make sure that we don't risk losing our vital images by making an appropriate backup? And of course the first question is, why do we need to back up? Because all of this hardware has a built-in life. Mostly we store our images on the hard drive on our computer, and those have a limited life. A hard drive or mechanical hard drive will last up to around 5 years, but they could fail within weeks of purchase. There's no guarantee. If you're using a solid state drive, they can last up to 10 years, but again, they have a limited life. So having an appropriate backup strategy and actually performing backups on a regular basis is absolutely critical if you don't want to lose those vital images. And of course, data can also be lost accidentally. We can lose it due to file corruption on our computers occasionally. We can accidentally delete the wrong file or overwrite a file with another file name, and even could be held hostage with ransomware and those sorts of things that attack your computer. So unless you want to be absolutely horrified and tearing your hair out, it's critical that we have a proper systematic system for getting our images backed up. And if you get this far and you turn off, just remember, you have been warned. It's too late once you've lost all your data. So now that we know that we need to make backups of our images, what's the best way to go about that? And things have changed a lot over the last 10 or so years. Once upon a time, the good old DVD or CD was the way to back up our image files, and it was pretty reliable. But of course the problem has been that once we generated to higher resolution photographs and bigger file sizes, putting them on DVDs became a bit impractical. One DVD will hold up to 4.7 gigs of data, but let's just take an example of a fairly generous image catalog. Mine is something in the order of 3 and a bit terabytes. So let's say, take a round figure, 4 terabytes of data. If you were to burn all of that onto a DVD, you would at least need 850 DVDs, and that really is pretty impractical to do that. How long would it take to do, and then what do you do in terms of sorting those out and being able to find images again? It's a nightmare situation, and that's why nobody pretty much these days works with DVD storage. Great for backing up your personal data, your personal family documents and so forth, but when we're starting to talk about large image files, it's not practical. And so the second option might be, well, let's consider cloud storage. It's all the rage these days, and there's lots of different providers that offer various amounts of cloud storage, some free, some you pay for. So let's just have a look at that. It's an easy method of storing your images, and of course it has the advantage of being off-site, so that if your house burns down, your data is protected. But there's a problem. There's a time factor to upload these images. At around of, say, 2 gigabytes per day upload, which is typical for Australia's NBN, it would take 2,000 days to upload 4 terabytes of photos, and that's 5.5 years of working on it all day, every day, uploading your images. And it's just totally impractical. 5.5 years of your life given away to just doing backups. So great for personal files and small documents, but not practical for photographs. So And there's also a cost associated. There are free cloud storages available, but they're generally only fairly small, a few gigabytes, maybe 10 or 20 gigabytes at most. But if you want 4 or 5 terabytes of storage, you're going to be looking at paying something in the order of 50 to 70 Australian dollars a year. That's per year, every year, for 5 terabytes. So cloud storage, while it has a lot of attractions, from a practical point of view, it is a little bit of an issue. So what's the next best option? Well, the good old external hard drive is a very practical alternative. External hard drives offer you the best bang for your buck. Today in 2021 you can purchase a 6 terabyte external hard drive for around 200 Australian dollars, and you can readily connect this to your computer via USB or Thunderbolt and start backing up immediately. But of course you need to remember that all hard drives will fail, so having a second external or an external hard drive as your backup is not going to be 100% guaranteed. So practically you would need to have 2 of these and have a bit of an insurance policy, double redundancy, and less chance of any individual disk failing at any time. So in order to make a double backup of all your files, you'd be looking at $400 or even more if you wanted to have extra redundancy. But certainly from a practical point of view, external hard drives are the best option. But there are also some other options, and that is something like an external array of hard drives, often called a RAID type backup device, and that is a device that has multiple hard drives in the one enclosure, and using a system of redundancy called a RAID arrangement, you can ensure that even if one disk fails, your data is not lost. And something like a Drobo, which is a very popular backup device for photographers, it has an inbuilt proprietary software device that allows you to even program it to ensure that even if 2 drives failed simultaneously, your data would be protected. And the beauty of this is that if any one of those drives fails, you can hot swap them. In other words, without turning the device off, you can remove the faulty hard drive, insert a new one, and the data is then reconstructed automatically. It's basically a plug and play or plug and forget, and it will work for you very reliably. But of course these are quite expensive. You're talking about $1,000 and upwards for a storage device. But again, how critical is your information, and what value do you place on it? So let's just summarize that by saying, well, we could have the option of burning our own DVDs, and we need at least 850 discs, and that's about $1 each. So you're looking at spending $850 plus months, days, years to do the backup. And DVDs also have a lifetime, and maybe around 25 years in ideal storage conditions, but nobody really knows for sure. So DVDs will cost you about $850. Cloud storage, let's just say if we looked at 10 years, the life of a hard disk, and you were paying $70 a year, you're going to be looking at $700 and upwards for the sort of storage that you would need. But of course your problem is it's going to take you 5.5 years to upload all that information. So from a practical point of view, it's not going to be working. And of course the last one we looked at was the external hard drives stored locally, and if you're really paranoid, you should have one of those hard drives kept elsewhere in another house or a relative's place. You're going to be looking at around $600 to $800, assuming that one of those hard drives will fail in that time. So either way, you're looking at around $800. Or if you want to go a little bit more protected with a little bit more security, you're going to be looking at around $1,200 and upwards. But even with something like a RAID device, I would also have another backup device just in case anything failed with that, just to be 100% secure. And that really brings us to the question is, what is your data worth? There is no cheap backup option, but if you want more security, you'll have to spend more money. And it comes back to, what value do you place on your personal memories, your photographic collection? We think nothing of spending $1,000 or $2,000 on a new lens, but people balk at spending a few $100s on a backup device for their photos. So you need to make a decision about how vital is your photographic collection. We've looked at options for backup devices, but a backup device is no good unless you have a proper backup strategy implemented to securely copy your files and make sure that they're protected. And there's a number of different ways we can do that. Firstly, any backup strategy that you come up with needs to work, and it needs to be reliable. It's no good investing in a whole lot of external hard drives and then forgetting to actually do the backups. It's going to be worse than useless. And of course, you can have automated backups, and they can be a good option because you can basically set and forget. But the problem is that sometimes those automated systems stop working for one of many reasons, and if you haven't bothered to go and check it occasionally, you might get a nasty shock when something does go wrong and you find that, whoops, it stopped working 2 years ago and I've just assumed that it all worked. So automated backups are fine, but you need to be able to ensure that it is working. And there are a number of different options, some of which just copy the entire contents of your hard drive each time you run a backup, and that just ends up making multiple duplicates of all of your files. And not only will you run out of space very quickly, but you'll find it nearly impossible to find a file that's gone missing. So that's not a practical option also. And what you need is a backup system that will initially look at all of the files that you nominate, make a full copy of those, and then each time you run your backup software, it will look at what has changed and then incrementally add those new files to that backup's destination, and that will be the most efficient option. And finally, one thing that I personally don't like is that some proprietary software stores all of your backups inside an encrypted file that in theory protects it, but if for any reason that software fails to work, you can't access your backup files. So I like to be able to see all of my files in the backup location, and I can do a quick check to see that everything is working. And one question that often comes up is, oh well, I've got Apple's Time Machine, or I've got the Microsoft Backup working. Well, they're free packages that come with the operating system, but they don't offer you the sort of flexibility and controls that you need to be able to implement to ensure that what you're backing up is being backed up in the appropriate way. And the best that I've been able to investigate with looking at both of these systems is that they offer a very basic system. The Apple one makes copies of all your files each time it does a backup, and then once it fills up the hard drive, it starts deleting the oldest backups. So if you've deleted a file some time ago and only just realized 2 years later on, whoops, it may well have been deleted by the backup software. So relying on the operating system's inbuilt backup system is not really a practical option. The best way to go about this is to use third-party software that will create and maintain your backups in a way that you can control and manage, that suits the way you want to work. And there are many different types of software around. A couple that I use here as examples: Acronis True Image, GoodSync, and Eases to do backup software. They all cost a little bit of money, but not a large amount of money, and there are lots of others. I suggest that if you're looking at purchasing one of these, go and investigate them, and you can get a trial generally for 21 or 30 days to give it a try. So a backup strategy not only has to work, it has to be able to handle the sort of options that we want. And to run an appropriate backup strategy, the first thing we need to do is we need to ensure that all of our image files are in the one location. And I've mentioned this previously, but what you need to do, you need to have all of your image files under one master file and then all other folders within that, and so your backup software can easily find where they are and do the backups. And in this example, I have 2 hard drives in this computer, and the D drive contains only my data, and you'll see that there are 2 folders there, one for the Lightroom catalog and one that holds all of my images. And I suggest what you do is create a master file And if you don't have two hard drives on your computer, create a folder that's separate from the operating system and call it My Images. Now, when not My Images or My Pictures, because that could be confused with Apple or Microsoft's own folder, but call it your name. In my case, Michael's Images works for me. If your name isn't Michael, use your own name. And in that way, you will have a master folder that contains all of your images, and then every other folder can go within that structure, and you only then need to point the backup software at the master folder. And we'll come back and talk about the Lightroom catalog as a separate exercise further on. But again, if you create a separate folder that holds your catalog and all of its subfolders, you can simply perform backups of that as well in the same manner. So having created our master folder, each time you make a photo shoot, create a folder within that folder, and you will see then that you've got a whole range of folders there, and that's an easy way to access your information, and it's also an easy way to check that your backups actually contain the same information. And I know that some people talk about, well, you should create dates and things for your individual folders, but of course all that information is held in the metadata in your image files and is easily searchable in Lightroom. I create folders that have names that mean something to me. Then it might be a photo shoot, a particular trip or event, and that's how I order them. But you need to make a system that works for you. Essentially, the master folder is like the filing cabinet that contains all of your information, and each subfolder is equivalent to a folder in any of the drawers, and that's easily searchable and easily manageable. And when you're doing your backups, you only need to worry about searching through the master folder. And of course, once you've ensured that all of your files are in the right location, when you're using Lightroom, you need to make sure that it's looking at the right files in the right folders. And Lightroom is an essential tool in managing your images, controlling the metadata, and of course all your processing and ratings and so forth. Lightroom is an incredibly flexible tool, but you need to make sure that it's looking at the right folders and looking at the right images. And of course, in your Lightroom catalog, if you have all of your information structured in the same way, it's going to be easily searchable. But just remember that when you back up the Lightroom catalog, it does not back up the images. All you're doing is backing up the catalog information. If the images are lost, the catalog won't save you. And if you're going to consolidate all of your files that may be spread over different locations, and I've seen some real doozies of confusion with files on several different external hard drives and duplicate copies here, there and everywhere, it can be a real nightmare to get it all in order. And if you're in that situation where you've got multiple locations of images, use Lightroom to move the images so that it will know where the folders have been moved to and all the images will be still accessible. It's quite a simple method to do that, so that when you look at your Lightroom catalog and you're looking at the hard drive that contains your images, firstly you'll see that the total number of images in my archive is over 90,000 images, and then each folder you can see how many images exist within that. And if you're searching for particular images and you have an idea of where it was taken, you can just simply go to the folder, and then that narrows your search criteria very simply. So getting your files in order is an absolute must before you start to attempt to set up a backup strategy. And secondly, once you've done that, you need to then set up your backup software. And an important thing to remember here, and I can't emphasize this too much, is that using a system that synchronizes files across two folders is not a valid backup strategy. And there's a very simple reason for that. Let's say you've got a file or a series of files on your hard drive, the C drive or D drive, and you've got a backup to an external hard drive or a storage array, something like a Drobo. And let's say you've got a second backup to another hard drive somewhere else. So all good so far. And let's say, well, let's go even further and say we've got a third backup somewhere on the cloud or off-site. All good so far. But then there's a problem. If you've done this same system and you've done all of these backup, if you've got a corrupted file or a deleted file, if you're synchronizing folders, what happens is your corrupted file or your deleted file also gets deleted from your backup. So, when you discover that you've lost a file and you go to your backup, you'll find that there's no backup to restore because you've synchronized your folders, and the files that have been deleted are deleted in both locations, and that is not a valid backup strategy. So by default, a lot of backup systems will merely do synchronization of your information, and that's not going to work. You need to ensure that your backups are a one-way backup, and we'll step through that now. As I say, one-way backups are a valid strategy. So let's start again with our hard drive that contains our master folder and all of our files, and we've accidentally deleted an image. Oops. Now we make a one-way backup from our master folder to our backup drive, but we ensure that there are no deletions of files. So if you delete a file from your main folder, it is not deleted from your backup. And if it's a corrupted file, it won't be read, and the backup software will flag that up as being a problem, and so it won't inadvertently overwrite the file. But of course your deleted file is still on the backup because we've told the software not to delete any files. And so you discover the file's lost. Yes, you can go to your backup folder and find the file and restore it quite safely. And that's the way that you need to be able to work. And I'll use an example of how to set up these options. And I use the program called GoodSync, which I find works really well for me. And so here's your structure. We're taking all of our files from our master folder on our D drive, and we're making a one-way copy to my backup device, which happens to be a Drobo. And you'll see there that actually there's 15.9 terabytes of storage on that Drobo, but because I've elected to have the option of being able to save my data even if 2 of my 5 hard drives fail simultaneously, I've got plenty of backup space available. And what we're doing is we're copying left to right from our main folder on our computer to my backup device, and it creates a duplicate series of folders on the backup device. And the important thing is, in the options of your backup jobs, make sure that no deletions are allowed, and even if you did leave those deletions option turned on, you can nominate a period of time as to when those deleted files are kept. But I would turn that off just to be on the safe side, and that will avoid mistakenly deleting files that have been deleted from your main drive. And for each of your various other backup jobs, you set it up the same way. One-way backup will give you the greatest amount of safety. And looking at our Lightroom options, and people will know that Lightroom has an inbuilt backup setting, and you should have set up that when you installed Lightroom. But what the problem is, within Lightroom, what it does, it takes a full copy of your catalog and makes a duplicate and stores it in the backup device. And normally I would be backing up my catalog once a week, or more often if I've been doing a lot of work on my photography. And what happens is that over time, each time you run this backup, it creates a full copy of everything. And so if I did it once a week, over a year, I would have 52 copies of my catalog. And I've checked this, and the whole backup takes up to 400 megabytes. So you're taking up a lot of backup space. Now this is still a good way to ensure that your catalog is backed up, but once you've set that up, you need to go in occasionally and delete the older copies. You only really need 2 or 3 backups of your catalog, because the only reason you'd need to access your backup is if for some reason your current catalog becomes corrupted, or there's some problem with it and you need to go back to an earlier version. So just use this system, but ensure that you go and clean the folder out every so often and remove those duplicates. And you'll end up with multiple file folders, something like this with dates on them, and they can be quite extensive. So an easier way to do that is we can set up a backup job using our proprietary software to do a backup. Again, a one-way backup, the same as for our images. Only the changed files will be copied. So your catalog file will be copied each time and overwritten, and then all of the previews and other data that has not been changed will not be overwritten. And that makes one up-to-date current copy of everything, and that's probably the first place to go if there was an issue with your folder or catalog. So having set up those two options, the next step would be to set up the backup jobs to run automatically or do them manually. I choose to do them manually because that way I know then that the jobs are being done. And this is the GoodSync interface, and you'll see here that you've got an image, Michael's Images backup job, and when I run that job, we click the button that says Analyze. It will look at all of the images and it will give me a report there of all the files that have been changed. And you'll see that the only copies that are happening are left to right from the main hard drive to the backup, and it's only copying the changed files. And then once it's analyzed, you press the sync button and it does the backup. And again, we're doing left to right backup only, no deletions, not synchronizing the files. And other versions of software will have similar settings, and you can set them up to work the way that you want them to work. Having done all that and making sure that the backups are being done, go in occasionally and check that the actual files are being duplicated. Now here's a snapshot of part of my hard drive. My master folder on the D drive contains a whole bunch of folders, and if I look at my backup folder on my Drobo, which is the G drive, I can check that yes, do the same folders occur in each location, and yes they do. And I can see here that in that folder there are 436 items, and in the backup there are 436 items. So I'm pretty confident that it is working, and it's working effectively. So periodically checking up, you can be confident that it is working. And that's a simple way to control your backup. Now you are completely protected with redundancy if you follow these rules. Your external hard drive with all of your external image, with all of your master files on it, and when and if, well not if, when this fails, you have a backup on your external device, such as a Drobo. You have a second backup on another external disk, and you may even have a third series of backups. And if you're running all of those jobs the same way, when those folders fail on your master copy, you have 3 up-to-date versions that you can make backups from. And you've got plenty of redundancy built in. And that way you'll be ensured of making secure backups and being able to access them when inevitably one of those hard drives fails. Thanks for watching. I look forward to seeing you again soon.